Welcome back to the Obojima Podcast. My name is Jeremiah, this is Ari, and that is Adam, and we are the writers for the Obojima campaign setting. Today you're going to be joining us as we go in for another one of our writers' meetings, which we do every week. This time we're going to be talking about the Corrupted Coastline. Oh my gosh, we did it right at the same time. It was perfect.
Yeah, we're pros.
I missed the cue.
Yeah, you missed the cue. It was a flare off in the distance.
You were appreciating.
Yeah. The Corrupted Coastline. So Obojima has experienced what is the thing from Majora's Mask? You've fallen into a terrible fate. Oh, I can't remember. Anyways, Obojima is struggling some issues. Currently being onboarded by a bunch of evil goo on the eastern coastline. The corruption has hit Obojima hard, and it is affecting a portion of the island. And that's what we're going to talk about today. It is another location build where we're just going to kind of talk about what we think is happening and then kind of expand on it. But this time, the location is not a village. Similar to like the abandoned airfield that we did a couple episodes back, this is less of a place for you to go buy items and more of a place for you to experience. Or you
keep a distance from.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, unless you want to kind of get all funky wonky.
So let me jump in. Let me go to my notes here, and we'll talk about. Let's start with what's happening here. So, from what I think I know, the corruption is crawling from the shoreline, from underneath the water.
The ocean, yeah.
It's staining the water black, and it's crawling up the sand and touching the trees and changing things that it touches. Yeah. It's changing things in a vastly different way depending on what the thing it is. For certain creatures, like some of the aquatic life, like the fish, it's not turning them undead, but it's like
skeletonizing them.
It's skeletonizing them. It's ripping the flesh off, and like they're still alive. They're still sentient, but they are bones. And it happened not only to the little aquatic things, but some big ones too, like the Sky King. The Sky King, who was once full of fleshy shark bits and is now just a giant skeleton, which you can see on the cover of the book.
Yeah. And the thing is that it's like the Sky King doesn't even know it.
Yeah.
It's the Sky King's just kind of doing the shark thing, the Sky King thing, but it's not in any way like it doesn't behave differently.
No. Right? Which is super interesting.
Is creepy.
Yeah. But it does change certain aspects of people in a more potent way, like the Corrupted Ranger, where it is causing them to, it didn't instantly strip the flesh off of them, so you got that going for you, but it is causing the Corrupted Ranger to become sick, and it is affecting the trees in a mysterious way.
It's even affecting spirits.
And it's affecting spirits.
Which is really weird.
And I want to jump onto that a little bit later. I will come back to spirits because something interesting in our episode about the spirits and spirit realm, I thought of something and I said, no, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait.
You have great willpower, Jeremiah.
Couldn't do it.
Only certain times.
I'd be like, blah, blah, blah. Here it is. Blah, blah.
So let's talk about what's happening. So the corruption's like creeping slowly. Yeah. And maybe it stopped. Like maybe at first it was fairly rapid. The corruption just appeared on the island 3 months ago, and it kind of, that's not necessarily true. 3 months ago, an earthquake happened, and then the corruption began to appear recently. And so it's crawling across the island and is now getting into like past the beach and into the forest, the tree line, and some of the swamplands and wetlands are being affected by this corruption. What do we think? What does any of that mean? What do we think some of that stuff means? How is it affecting the land? Like we know how it's affecting the aquatic life. It's altering them, and it's like kind of taking away from them, and changing them to the core, but like in a very specific way. How is it affecting the plant life?
So I just had a question because it is affecting aquatic life in one way. It's affecting, people, the corrupted ranger in another way. Mm-hmm. Do we want to find a way to unify those, or do we like the idea? I'm asking if we like I'm asking you what I believe, but is it cooler if it affects things differently? Like there's something interesting about that. There's like it's mysterious. So it's also something you can't quite figure out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I wonder, like, can you remind me the ways in which it affects the corrupted ranger? Because that might be a jumping off point for how it affects everything.
So the theme that I went with, and this is kind of my base understanding of the corruption, is that the corruption takes and it gives at the same time. And usually when it takes something, it also grants something with it. So for example, it's taking the wellness of the ranger and it's granting it some unique abilities, but at the cost of their health. In the case of, for example, like the corrupted muck, which is this like kind of creature, this sentient creature, it's not like, you know, the clay and soil is not really losing anything. It's being gifted sentience. And so the corruption has this kind of like take things, give things type of nature. And for the most part, it has kind of, it's what seemingly more of like a sinister effect on things. But that's like kind of the baseline that we're sharing, or that I think we're currently have kind of come to the conclusion on.
I mean, is the corruption, you know, we're saying it takes something, gives something. Is it like a virus? Is it non-sentient? Or is the corruption, does it have some sort of weird,
Like a will?
yeah, like is it not necessarily like demonic or, you know, like an elder spirit, like a corrupted spirit, but does it have a purpose? Like, does it have an intention, or does it have like a will, like you said, like, does it have an end game, or is it just like a disease?
I think I see it as like a natural disaster.
Yeah.
Where it's just occurring. It is taking and giving because that is what it does. It is affecting the island because that is what it does.
Is there a weird thing that when it melds with the island, that something weird happens? Like, okay, it melds with the corrupted ranger, so it encounters a living being, and then it interfaces with that living being, and these behaviors or these powers emerge. But Obojima, we've said, is a magical island, and that some believe on Obojima that the island has a will of its own, that the island sent. Others might not believe that. I'm Obojima, Schmobojima, you know, I don't care. It's like, I just want my radishes to grow. But if the corruption interfaces with the island, is there something weird that's going to happen?
Potentially.
Yeah.
I think there's also something to the contact of the corruption that might change certain things. Because the fish and the seawater and the sand and the muck and the mud all have contacted the corruption for a long period, compared to the ranger who's touched it and been
it's
and I was like, it's absorbed some of it, but it's disconnected. They severed that connection, and so now the corruption's pulling from them. It's causing them to become ill. But it's slow because they're not holding on, compared to like the fish who's swimming in it for who knows how long. The trees are soaking it up through the roots. The sand is being coated in it. And so I think it's like the corruption, the more contact you have with the corruption, the more it affects you and changes you.
So it's like almost terraforming in a way.
Yeah.
Like let's say that corruption is some alien thing that it at its end state will look a certain way. The Obojima, if the Obojima succumbs to the corruption, it will look a certain way. Like when you go to the corrupted zone and you see the forest, you're going to see sort of what the ultimate fate is of Obojima, should no hero step up to stop it.
Yeah. I think so. I think the corruption is I don't think we need to detail the specifics. Like,
sure,
it's not an equation. It's not A plus B equals C. A plus corruption equals this. I think the corruption, along with many of the mysteries, will always have unique effects, but specifically to the island, it is altering it in a very devastating manner. And I also think maybe this next thing I wanted to bring up too, maybe I'll finally drop my lore bit and we can and maybe that might help us come to the conclusion on certain things. But earlier we were talking about spirits and we were talking about the fact that when they become so vile and evil, or they become this dubious thing, they become demons instead, or they're given the label of demon and cast out of the spirit realm. But that's by choice. What if the corruption, and we've already talked about how the corruption affects spirits, what if the corruption forces the switch to demon? Like a good aligned spirit becomes a demon.
Wow, there's so many, like, the implications there are interesting, because, like, I like that. So any spirit that comes in contact with this thing makes a switch. So there's basically, like, regular version and then demonic version.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that when a spirit in the spirit realm gets branded a demon and cast out, are they, like, anointed with corruption? You know, like...
Interesting.
And then cast into the material realm, which says something about what spirits would think about people, just like you guys deal with this.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also another interesting thing that if you are a human, it's like saying we have a fleshy barrier around our spiritual center, right? And if the corruption touches the fleshy barrier, the corruption actually has to work through this fleshy barrier to get to this thing. But if it touches a spirit, the spirit doesn't have almost any resistance against it. Is that what you're like? Yeah. Like that kind of a thing, like instant. It's almost an instant transformation that the spirit is easily corrupted. Like spirits are easily corrupted by this thing, whereas material things, it takes a longer time.
Is there, I know we've talked about there not being, at least known yet, a treatment, a cure for it. Does that mean that a spirit that is corrupted has become something else entirely? Like they are no longer that thing?
I think there could potentially be a cure. Maybe that's something the players have to work on. Like that's part of the quest. Maybe that's something that AHA is attempting to figure out.
Almost certainly.
I also love that means, as we discussed, the fact that a corrupted ranger could lose the thing that makes them special, which is a very unique, interesting end to a player where they don't die. That's not the end of the adventure. They just become
demons.
You went full the other way.
I went the other way.
Yes,
great.
that is crazy and cool. But I was going to say they just become, if they get cured.
Oh, if they get cured.
They just become regular people again.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you, I thought because I'm sitting there thinking like the spirit, like if this corruption's corrupting the ranger, it's slowly trying to eat through to their spirit. And they're like basically in a battle for their spirit,
which is cool. Maybe that's what happens when you turn 20th level.
I'd say, is that a different capstone ability?
A different capstone ability is that you just become a demon.
Yeah.
That you lose at 20th level, you lose agency.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
That's really cool.
And then, but if you're cured, it's like, if I was DMing it, I would be like, cool. If you want to stay a ranger, choose a different subclass, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. But like you said, it's kind of encouraging the idea of a player having an arc, or a character having an arc, and then that's a satisfying end for that character.
That's a super satisfying end to that character.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of a character arc that it's like that's the whole thing of it.
Well, I think it's like, powerful because you have the whole thing. Like we've talked about this a million times. Just like D&D is a memory making game, right? Yeah. That's what it is. You don't win D&D. You make memory. I mean, that's how you win D&D, right? Yeah. And so having a character that has an end, like it's so rare. First of all, for groups to finish a campaign, let alone retire a character and say like this character's story has been told. And I just, I think that's really powerful.
Yeah.
It also, I think, if I was running a Corrupted Ranger and I got to that point, it's like there is this choice at the end of it. Like there's a great story between the last shred of my humanity, right? And my demon nature that's emerging. And do I sacrifice myself? Mm-hmm. Is my ultimate end of it, like I'm sacrificing myself, not going to let the demon nature win and save the party, or do something like, wandering it into the Mount Mordor, or do I just embrace the demonic like thing that's emerging and like, yes, and
that too can also inspire the next story, right? Like you can become a demon and then, you're struggling with that concept. DM can and a player can come to what they want to do, but does that mean now the rest of the group is trying to find a way to redeem that person, right, and get that person back? So there's that's great. Everything can just catapult to the next thing.
I feel like I think the current build up for the Corrupted Ranger is less like, there is something inside of you that's like the corruption is affecting you and it has some control of you in certain cases. But it manifests more as a sickness leading up to it. And I think the capstone of the sickness then is just like, is almost, and maybe it's more, maybe it's more similar to the same thing that the corruption does to the mud, where it's like, it takes your life and it embodies its own, like you're almost like an avatar for, like you're a demon, but none of you exists within itself anymore. It's just your corpse.
Trip. Like it's like imagine like a lot of these corrupted beings that you're running into might be corrupted rangers that were once, people that, like when the corruption first hits the shore, like after the earthquake and the tsunami and all that, it's like there's this corruption and the first people on scene are going to be these rangers.
Yeah.
And those are the ones, that group of people, because there's probably only very limited, you might roll up a Corrupted Ranger, but you're probably one of maybe 10 or 15 Rangers.
That's actually really cool, because you imagine if we would if Obojima, the book, took place 3 months before, there might have been a faction of these Rangers. But the whole group faction went and investigated this thing, and they all got
essentially cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, the seventh faction of Obojima that no longer exists.
So any of you out there who want to play Obojima pre-corruption, there you go.
Yeah, you just roll up your regular ranger, you go out there, but you were the ones that were like the first responders,
And then that's how you end that campaign, and you have a Rogue One situation.
Yeah.
And then that's it.
Yeah, no, you play through, oh my gosh, you play through. Okay, I'm building out the story for you. Someone play this campaign.
Please,
you play through an adventure where you solve and sever the corruption.
Yeah.
And then you start a new campaign and the corruption doesn't exist. And everyone's like, we did it.
Well, yeah.
And then it ends in the group of people finding the corruption. And it's like, no, it's the precursor. You're playing before it hits.
You played the prequel.
Yep.
Yeah.
You played the prequel. I gotcha.
Great.
God, that's good.
But what do you mean by sever the corruption?
Oh yeah. That's interesting. That's interesting. Maybe that's something you'll have to read the book to find out. That being said, okay, so we know that the corruption's encroaching on the wetlands. What word am I trying to say?
Encroaching?
Encroaching? Did I say that? All right. Well, it's encroaching. I feel like I'm going crazy. On the wetlands, and clearly there was a group of people that have seen it first. There's a village that's close by, but that's its own village in itself. But that is definitely the people that are dealing with the corruption the most is this village. But specifically in the wetlands, it's changing spirits. It's imbuing life into certain things. It might be affecting animals in certain ways. What NPCs are here? What adventure hooks can we throw in here? And what are some of the specific dangers that are unique to this location that you can't find anywhere else?
I mean, this is more kind of for us to springboard off of later, but or when writing this. But I think the visual treatment of corruption, right? Whatever it is, however it touches and changes the landscape, has to be really, really loud and apparent. right?
Yeah.
It has to be very clear that this is a corrupted, wood or a corrupted, swamp or whatever it is.
Yeah.
What that does. Now, here's a question. Is the corruption continuing to spread in an aggressive way? Has it kind of mysteriously slowed? Or people are like, oh, we thought it was going to, all the models that we built, that AHA built out, said the whole island was going to be overrun in another month. But it's oddly just kind of, is it stagnating? Is like what?
I feel like it's probably slowed. I think it's like, it's gotten to a certain space and then ceased temporarily at least.
Yeah. Or it could be like it moved into the land a bit and now it's sinking. Like you don't see it moving horizontally, but it's moving vertically.
Oh.
And so maybe that's a thing that everybody's like, oh, it slowed down, and it caused great havoc and oh my gosh, and it was terrible. But then AHA has done like, some core samples and they're like, it's moving down. Like it's,
that's good. That's really cool.
And then who knows what it's going to do. Then maybe it goes down and under and then it pops up somewhere else.
So I guess what is the experience of going through a corrupted landscape other than like, don't touch it, okay, got it. Like, but what?
I think there's a pretty tonal change that we'd have to experience. For example, if you've spent the last year exploring Obojima, which is full of spirits and magical life and animals, and then you walk into a forest where you don't hear any animals, that's eerie.
Yeah.
Just silence.
Yeah.
So do you need special equipment to go, like, if it corrupts things that it touches? I mean, Corrupted Ranger is a perfect example. Do I need a special suit? Can I breathe the air that's corrupt? You know what I mean? Like, does the air get corrupted? Is it? Like,
I don't think it corrupts the air, probably. And maybe it's maybe if we go with what Adam's saying here, and it did kind of seep down, maybe it's only like the actual purest form of corruption that hurts you, that causes you to get sick.
It's a weird statement to see. Pure corruption.
Pure corruption. Well, like the I guess the embodiment of corruption, this this thick like slime type thing, touching that affects you. But what you're seeing around you is things like when you're stepping in the muck, or when you're stepping on top of, you're touching a tree that's turned black, or all the leaves have fallen, or maybe it's it's split open and it's dying or something. That thing has been affected, but it's not covered in corruption anymore.
Right, like the Corrupted Ranger doesn't corrupt other things by touching them. Yeah.
That being said, there might be portions where it's like, oh yeah, there's still pools of it, and it's still like, it's still like viscous and it's still there, and you don't touch that, and maybe it almost, it wants to move forward a little bit. So maybe as you get close, it kind of like slides
undulates a little.
Yeah, corrupted tendrils that all kind of moves and follows you.
Or maybe that's what maybe that's why it imbued life into the mud, into the clay, is those are almost sent out to like take things and bring it back.
That's pretty good. That's pretty
so
good.
maybe
you've
like
seen those what is that, magnetic fluid?
Yeah, ferrofluid.
But it's like the viscous kind that like rolls over magnets and it like seems to just like swallow it.
Gulp.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Okay, what if there's like almost like roots of a tree, like there's a thick collection of it all on the coast, and then as it gets into the forest, it kind of like spreads out.
It's like mycelium.
Yeah.
It's fungal.
Yeah, it's slimy. Yeah.
And so you can find big pools of it and big strains of it. But like most of the cases you'd step over and not even notice it.
Makes you think of like if it's like mycelial, like they're like, say if there's a living thing, that all the stuff that's connected, the corruption, it'll respond. All of it will respond at once.
Yeah.
So it's a giant sensory network, and so corruption will go where there's a food source or where there's life force or whatever corruption is feeding on. That's sort of like the scary part of it. It's like it's heading for villages. Like there was that experiment they did with the slime molds, and they took a bunch of different food sources and put them all on the slime mold, found the most efficient way, and then they based a subway system off it, right? So that this corruption could work like that. And so almost like when it consumed the first village in the first forest, then it's searching for the next life force.
Yeah.
Almost like that. If you were to look at it, topographically, you would actually see, you can imagine where it begins on the coastline or coming out of the ocean, but very straight kind of lines that like where it's kind of like shot out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as opposed to it just like gradually radiating out like the way like a forest fire would grow.
Yeah.
It looks like it's there are little like furrows in the earth now where these things have found like dug these little like trenches to expand almost.
Yeah.
It might not be as efficient for it to move overland. It might be more efficient to move through the water table.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow.
And then bubble up and stuff like that. That's
bubble
neat.
up into springs and wells.
Yeah.
So what I like about that and what you were saying is that things that you're more likely to come in contact with things that have been affected by it than you are to come in contact with it directly.
Yeah.
Which allows us to traverse that land, which ultimately is what we need.
Yeah.
Right. You want to go through it. I could imagine you might find, to go back to NPCs, it would be really cool to see like in the swamp area, which you could imagine it already having a village on stilts. They're kind of holding out. They don't want to leave. They're still on stilts. They're finding, they're able to not come in contact with this stuff, but now they need to find ways to get things either airlifted to them or whatever. And so, or they could have like this hardened, like survivalist mentality of just like, this is our swamp kind of thing. And
Yeah.
And they're walking on stilts.
which is super cool.
Yeah.
Is there anything that would make the corruption like retreat? Is there like a damage type that you could imagine? Or it's like, it recoils from
Radiant damage.
or cold, whatever it is, or something. It's like, ooh, it doesn't like that. Or that might make it like grow really quickly if you like hit it with like, force damage or whatever. I don't know.
Oh man. Okay. This is me thinking of what we know about the corruption.
Sure.
That we're not quite sharing with everyone. What if healing hurt it?
Dude, yeah. Yeah.
Like what if a little bit of like if it's like
healing potion you
like
pour
a
on
healing potion on it was almost like acid to it.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. I want to talk about. We'll talk about all that a little bit later. I'm having an idea, but I need to express it to you in another way.
I saw you scribbling notes, and I'm like,
I've got a lot of things.
Secret notes.
So as far as like NPCs though, as you were touching on it, go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking like somebody who's in the depths of corruption, who's beyond help. Like this tortured soul. Or an elder spirit that's been corrupted would be super freaky.
An elder spirit that's been corrupted is really cool.
Yeah.
I like the idea of like someone who is not as maybe strong-willed or doesn't have the body to handle this illness like a ranger would have, and so they're like well into their sickness.
Yeah.
Well into their sickness.
And it would also kind of portend what happens to, that's great. This is one of those first responder rangers. And, I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
What about a village? Like a village that's been hit by it and they're just all kind of like.
So we were talking about this is because there's the village and the stilts in the water that's like dealing with kind of the corruption on it, like, because they're the closest. I like the idea of a village that used to be there, but is completely.
And maybe that's why the village on stilts built their village on stilts, because they saw what happened to that village and they were like, we've only got so much time to like either get out of here. And they were like, screw it. We're going to stay here because we're tough.
Yeah.
And so they just were like, we're going to put it on stilts. And they did it and they built it. And then now they've just dealt with it over time.
Yeah. That's
but
cool though.
They saw what happened.
To also touch on like people walking around on stilts and stuff like that. What if we took one of the major witches? I'm talking about like one of the leaders of the Fishhead Coven is here with like a team of other witches, and they are collecting the corruption. They're like, I'm not leaving this to one of the lower, one of the main three is there, and she is there like,
this is too
this
good
is
to,
it
to leave.
Yeah, like she's the only one that she feels like she would
if
do
I
it.
still have a charge, that might be a good NPC to throw in here.
Okay, all right. So that would be really cool. Another thing that I think would be interesting is a spirit that has been affected by this that isn't quite fully changed yet.
Yeah.
That's like dealing with like this kind of like you could almost like, I'm imagining like their skin is slowly turning like navy blue or something like that, and they're kind of like half, like it's almost like half of their body is almost like paralyzed. And they're kind of like trying to be joyous, but at the same time having these like really cynical outbursts where they're like, we'll make it through. It's okay. I just need to get back to the spirit realm or whatever, and I'll be fine. And then, then they'll like get incredibly frustrated and scream at one of the NPCs or something like that. And they're like, I don't know what came over me. I'm almost feeling like, if they were almost like a motherly figure where they're like really, really like kind, and then they just have these extreme outbursts.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So it's like this corruption is affecting them on that level.
Yeah. Which is interesting.
That's far out.
Another interesting NPC that we could possibly throw in there is someone. Oh, you have someone?
No, I can't find where it is.
Oh, bummer. Another interesting NPC is, maybe like a ranger that has been trying to stop it. Someone who's like purposely putting up like cutting trees down and building walls and dugouts and digging trenches.
Yeah.
And they're like, maybe they're even frustrated with AHA because they're like, you're here and you're experimenting on it, but you're not fighting the fight.
Yeah.
Like, I'm here preventing it from spreading.
I want to see a duo of, you have one of these rangers and one of these like field, AHA agents or whatever. And, you have like the scientist and like the person of action kind of working together would be kind of cool.
Yeah. So that'd be pretty
cool
fun.
Dynamic.
I like that.
I want one of the floating fish spirits or floating fish, like even just whether it's a small school of them or just one, to just kind of, start following a group around. If you're able to make camp there and you wake up and you're just among this like school of skeletonized fish floating around, and you're like,
that's cool.
And they just kind of like take a liking to you, and
I
they're
like
just always
that.
nearby.
I really like that. I feel like, this is also the place where pretty much anyone can take any of the monsters in Obojima and put a twist on them, put on their own personal corrupted twist.
And that's the thing we could probably give some guidance on. Of
a little bit of guidance
You
there.
did this, and then like, what does corruption mean? What does the corrupted version of a thing mean?
Because, how creepy would a howler look if they were missing all of their fur and they were just like this dark gray kind of, because I'm imagining like, you ever see a dog that you have to shave off part of their belly for like surgery or something, and they have like the splotches all over them and stuff like that, like that, except there's like their ears still have fur and there's patches all over the place, and they're kind of like even more crazed than they were before. Like a howler prior to this isn't like super like, they're more selfish and less like they're aggressive because they want something. But I can imagine this howler being aggressive for the sake of wanting to hurt you.
Right. Yeah.
Just like, yes.
Yeah. But that would be really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, just like how this thing affects, it sounds like, the corruption affects your mind, like, and it can affect the mind in different ways. Like it could be outbursts, emotional outbursts. It could be deviousness. It could be paranoia. It could be all kinds of mania, like just different ways that it starts to affect you. As it, rots you away and attacks your spirit,
What if, so the spirit idea that I had that was like kind of pseudo in the wake of the effects of the corruption, what if we switched that from a spirit to a companion spirit? That was the companion spirit of the ranger who's sitting there trying to stop the corruption from spreading. And then you just have like the spectral spirit who's like kind of like, who's blue on top, and then like the bottom of their belly's all dark purple, and they'd have outbursts, and the ranger's always like, just go take a nap. I'll take care of the rest of this. and you're like, oh no.
That's a heart-wrenching story. No.
Yeah,
now
I
you
know.
have to cure it. There has to be a cure.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Yeah,
That's
a rough
pretty
one.
sad.
That's a rough one. We got to end on a happy note.
Well, the corruption, unfortunately, is not going to be a very happy location.
There's a way out.
Okay, so let's talk about this. So we talked about the dangers. We've talked about some of the NPCs. What's happening here? What's Let's talk about that village a little bit, because we've kind of talked about some of the ancillary things around it. Let's talk about like what's left in the village. Where did the people go? Did any of them make out? If they did, then where did they flee? Maybe they fled to the village on stilts, and maybe that's why the village is like kind of prepping themselves. Maybe the village on stilts hasn't really dealt with the corruption much, except for like, they're pulling up their fishing nets and they're full of dead pseudo meatless fish or something like that. And they're
good.
like, which is also, oh my gosh, which might be more concerning than anything else, considering how much Obojima relies on fish as a source of food.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
They're
It's a
like,
great-
oh my goodness, this is gonna strip our food source completely. But that's interesting. That's kind of cool. So what happens to the rest of the villagers? Did they not make it out?
What if, thinking about rubble golems, what if the village somehow is like, becomes this corrupted entity in
a
itself?
giant wandering monster in
Yeah.
itself.
It's just a shambling mess.
Huh.
That's interesting. You could have a very big rubble golem that's like a collection of like a big building that collapsed due to the corruption. Like, maybe the corruption, they didn't even see the corruption happening because it was crawling underneath the ground by the time it got to them.
It just came up.
Yeah.
What if? So an image that kind of popped into my mind was, as you get close to where this village was, you start to see a bunch of like derelict boats. And people they all tried to essentially escape when it was already too late, though. But you have all these kind of boats that were trying to get out. So there's this radius around where there's all these kind of like half sunk little ships and rowboats and stuff like that. And then it got me thinking. You just said rubble golem. Could it be a take on the rubble golem, where it's this entangled mass of ships?
Oh,
Or boats or whatever it is.
Well, so I guess that's the question then: is how close is how deep into the forest was the village?
right.
Was it like right on the outskirts of the forest, and then it was kind of up against the coastline, which I like. I actually think that's really cool. And you could do a mass of ships, but the ships that are outside, also there's something interesting about like a tendril holding on to the boat, like it's like grabbed it and pulled it down, and so the boat's like floating there, almost like a buoy,
Yeah.
and they're all over the place.
yeah.
It's just cool.
It's very
It's a cool place.
ominous.
Cool thing to explore. Things could make those buoy ships like their lair.
Yeah.
You could do all sorts of cool stuff. If you wanted to reintroduce harpies somewhere else on the island, that's a place to do it.
Or there's corrupted fish folk under there.
Oh, yeah.
They're
That's really
they're
good.
skeletonized and all messed
Oh,
up.
I love it.
Yeah. Like you could have, these crazy looking like viper fish humanoids that
Yeah.
are down there just like in the corrupted sort of sunken ship graveyard.
Okay,
know?
what
I like
about
that.
this? If there's these tendrils that are floating up with all the ships kind of floating underneath is are you guys familiar with the fish, the eel that spreads its mouth open and opens
Oh my
up
gosh,
wide and
yeah,
fills?
yeah.
So I took a photo of that because I saw a video of it recently and I was like, this has to be included somewhere. What if there's a giant one, like a humongous one that has been connected, and it is almost like it's not because it's skin, right? The thing that makes it cool is it can't be skeletal, but maybe it's being like, maybe that's like one of the elder creatures or one of these giant creatures. It's not fully corrupted like the Sky King yet, but it's like being held by the corruption, and it's like it's writhing, and you might be able to free it, if you wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, it might not live much longer, but it may live to see another day.
Yeah. Could be powerful enough that it could like will itself back into some form of health.
Yeah. but it's really cool, and I love the idea of it. Like, you know, the abilities you could give this thing to like suck up and you know, collect water, and then you're having maybe a combat against these fish folk inside the belly of this giant thing. Wow. But anyways, it's just interesting.
I mean, that whole idea, like, you know, makes me want a way to. I don't want to say there's a way to end the corruption definitively, but if you were interested in that, the idea of having that eel who can kind of fill its, you know, mouth with, you know, with you suck in all of this water, that if you free it and it becomes itself again, what it would then do, like if the corruption kind of made it kind of not in its own mind anymore, but if you free it, it's able to kind of will itself back. It would, in an act of sacrifice, pull all the corruption, essentially pull it all into himself, or itself rather, by, you know, sucking it through its mouth, and then
like slip into the abyss.
Yeah, something like that.
Or,
just take
you know,
it with it.
if you don't want it to end the corruption, on your way to deal with the corruption underwater, you know, it could come back to your aid at a later date.
That's great.
You know, like you're all sitting there like losing air, and it comes on and engulfs you and swims you up to the top or something.
Oh, that's great.
Thanks, buddy.
What
if the corruption actually, when it reached out and grabbed either some or all of the village and pulled it into the ocean, and so the village is actually corrupted under the ocean, and it's just like, I don't know, like this weird graveyard.
What if it like it couldn't make it all the way? So it's like the village is on the forest line, and it's like kind of disconnected and moved partially, and then a big portion of it's sucked underneath, and then there's all the boats that are there's all the boats that are floating everywhere.
It's like when a wave you know, retreats and pulls a sandcastle, so it's kind of like spread it out across this whole thing. Could be kind of cool.
When the tsunami hit, it like pulls the corruption on land, and then as the wave pulled back, it just scraped the village along with it.
It's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting, like if the village was, like maybe it was at one time, maybe it could have been a Nakadama ruin, because that way maybe it was made out of stone.
Yeah,
and there's like all these statues, you know, and you maybe it was a ancient Nakadama temple, and you know the villagers had built around it, but in the center, and then you know, but part of this ancient stone temple was pulled underwater, and it just gives it more of a creepy,
for sure,
kind of feeling.
Yeah,
so
I love it.
Crazy stuff.
Well, we're running out of time here, but
we have a train to catch.
There's trains to catch. That being said, I feel like we have a pretty strong understanding of this location now, and there's a lot for us to go off of when building it now.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
So much flavor. I think a lot of this is going to be unlike most of the locations that we have. This is going to be super heavy,
dangerous,
creepy. Like it's going to be a very different vibe for the rest of Obojima. So yeah, this was interesting.
Yeah. Corrupted stuff.
Anyways, thank you so much for joining us
for the Corruption Hour.
Adam, Ari, Jeremiah. We are the writers. Feel free to subscribe on YouTube or join us on Discord or Instagram or TikTok. At Obojima across all of them. You can see more playtest material and the book coming out very soon, hopefully. Actually, I guess we'll have a little while after this. The book will come out. Thank you all again for joining us, and we will catch you on the next set of podcast and in different sets of clothing. Isn't that exciting?
That's right. It's all about the change.
All right. Have a good one, and we'll catch you later. See ya. Bye.